Richard Boom here. I'm not part of this madness.
Must have been to a higher ground, lifted up to a better.
Hello guys, and thank you for tuning in to the premiere episode of I'm Not Part of This Madness, a show where I record my thoughts about society's madness. And the next 3 episodes that I will be releasing is quote-unquote a special, because I will be focusing on what the show is all about, so at least you could have context or you could get acquainted with what the show is all about. And at this early stage, I would inform you that this is not for the money. This project that I am doing is not for the money. Alright? Because I don't want to be beholden like the dinosaur media to any particular group or special interest. Although in the near future I might be asking you for your donations, or I would monetize this site with affiliate marketing. And this is because there are a lot of costs involved in running a show like this. But the primary focus won't be to make a lot of money, because I want to contribute something to the species. And I will get into that as I talk about who this show is intended for, or the target audience of this show. Not only am I doing this for my target audience, but also I am doing this for the selfish and self-serving reason of having my thoughts recorded and immortalized online. Alright, so I want to make those things clear before I go further into developing this project. As mentioned in the introduction, this episode will primarily talk about the intended audience of the show. And one of those people who I intend this show for, or at least the prototype or the category of people that I intend this show for, is my previous girlfriend. The idea of this show actually arose from my interactions with her. I mean, she's living in my house and we have a lot of conversations, and of course we have a lot of arguments. And one of those arguments is the argument or the debate between GMO and organic. And what I realized there is that her arguments are really very heavy on leftist ideas and mainstream propagandas. And we all know this. Leftist ideals are, I hate to say this, but it's really not well thought of, and it's always viewed through the lens of who's not benefiting, who's benefiting, the poor and whatever, right? And we all know that when things are put in the media, it's usually blown out of proportions, and there's a lot of fear-mongering in the media. I'm listening to her arguments and I'm thinking that I'm not biased at all in saying this. Of course, I'm biased in saying she can't be dumb because I am dating her, or, she's my girlfriend. But my realization in that moment is that it is very hard for people like her to, let me measure my words. It's very hard for people like her to evaluate the truthness or the falsehood of certain ideas. Especially, people like her do not have the formation of critical thinking. So for people like her, and especially for people who are very emotional or highly emotional, it's very hard to separate emotions from thoughts. For them, things are all together. And the problem there's nothing inherently wrong with that, but the problem there arises when people in the left put an emotional charge on every argument that they make. And when there is a lot of fear mongering in the media, that critical thinking or that thought process that is required to evaluate the truth or falsehood of certain ideas shut down in people that are emotional or people who cannot differentiate their emotions from their thought process. So I thought that there should be a show out there, anything out there, that presents ideas without the emotionally charged leftist style of arguing or presenting information. But lo and behold, I did not find anything out there that does not fearmonger or does not have any vested interest in the argument. So from that, I decided to make this show, and this is why I'm here. I'm talking because, I think of my previous girlfriend, and if she is like that, there should be more people like her who really want to know the truth in any given situation, but are limited because they cannot differentiate their emotions from their thought process. So in the show, I don't fearmonger. I do not have any vested interest on my arguments. And if I do, probably it's only to find out what the truth is, or this is something that I believe in based on the best evidence that I could find at the time of the recording. All right, so I will be honest and very transparent in presenting my ideas. All right, and I think in our era of fake news and leftist propaganda, honesty and transparency is a very hard commodity to find these days. Another person who I intend this show for is my friend Danny. And please bear in mind when I intend this show for a specific person. That specific person that I am describing is just a profile, or I'm using the profile of this person to describe to you the people that I have in mind when I sit down and record my thoughts. And as mentioned, one of those people is my former girlfriend and my friend Danny. So Danny, my friend, if you are listening to this, shout out to you, and I truly enjoy our conversations. And for those others who are listening to me right now, or at least to the recording of me, Danny is a friend of mine, and we often have, well, at least I consider it, deep conversations about politics, about spirituality, about health, about our positions on certain ideas. And I do consider this deep because these are conversations that you cannot have with a lot of people. Not a lot of people would openly talk about things or ideas they have. These are deep, deep stuff, like what you think about governments, or what you think about addiction, or what you think about certain topics, or the abstraction of what reality is, and all of this nice woo stuff that people don't really talk about. So I talk about that to this friend of mine, and from time to time we will disagree about certain ideas, and it's normal, especially because I'm not politically correct, and a lot of my ideas are considered radical by a lot of people, and these ideas kind of ruffles a lot of feathers, and it rubs against commonly held beliefs that a lot of people hold to be true despite the evidence to the contrary. Well, that last bit is not Danny, but I'm talking in general. People usually believe in things even if there is evidence to the contrary, and they believe what they want to believe, right? And this is something that I want to abolish, actually, through thinking and through promoting using your brains to analyze the truth and falsehood of certain ideas. The third intended audience that I think of when I'm recording is my brother and my sister. And I do think of them because they look up to me. Quote unquote, if you want to say they idolize me or they see me as an authority figure, then you might not be far off the mark, but I never knew how they look at me, if I'm an idol or an authority figure. But nonetheless, if you have people that are looking up to you, or at least this is how I see it, you have a certain responsibility to these people. And I do have certain responsibilities to my brother and my sister. Since they're looking up to me, I need to present my ideas in a very responsible way. I need to back up my ideas with thinking, not just emotions, because emotions are destructive, especially if you do not recognize it and if you cannot control it. And if you cannot tamper your emotions with reason, you will lead yourself to false conclusions. This is why we say do not make emotional decisions or do not decide when you are highly emotional. And this is also the reason why investors never make a trade based on their emotions, because emotions lead us to false conclusions. So going back to my brother, my sister, my former girlfriend, I do have responsibilities in expressing my ideas, and I need to guard myself from falsehoods as much as possible, and I need to base my ideas on actually thinking, because my ideas will be perceived by those people that are listening to me as friendly, quote unquote friendly. They won't see it as something that they should guard against. So more or less their defenses will be down, which is something I do not want, but because of the nature of my relationship with them, there will be less pushback when the ideas or when the arguments comes from me as opposed to a stranger. So this is my 3 intended audience for this show. First is my former girlfriend, or at least people like my former girlfriend who are emotional and cannot differentiate their thought process, or where their thought process and their fears or emotions begin. The second one would be my friend Danny, or people like Danny who want an intellectual conversation or could carry out an intellectual conversation without being too emotional when they're making their arguments. And the third group of people are people like my brother and my sister who are looking for a brotherly, quote-unquote brotherly advice, or an opinion that they don't necessarily have to guard themselves against. And that's it for this episode, and I know that is very tedious to listen to, but we need to start somewhere, and I think that was a very good place to start. So I hope I see you on the next episode, and I hope you continue listening and coming back for our future episodes. Thank you, and see you soon. Boom!
You should know a thing about